Okay, part 3, finding an unknown side. All right, so finding an unknown side like this. So when we look at it, we are given our angle, which is 30 degrees. We're given the opposite side, and we're given the hypotenuse, which is x. So what we want to do is we just want to replace everything that we know. So if we have sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse, when we look at this, we know that theta is 30 degrees. So we actually have the sine of 30 degrees equals the opposite is 7. The hypotenuse is x. So we get this equation, which is the sine of 30 equals 7 over x. Now, to solve this equation, we got to get x all by itself. But x is in the denominator. So what we really have to do is we have to multiply this side by x so that they cross off, and multiply this side by x. So what we get is x times the sine of 30 degrees equals 7. All right, so we basically just multiply both sides by x. We kind of cross multiply too. Now to solve this for x, you got to divide by the sine of 30 degrees, because they'll cross off here, and divide by the sine of 30 degrees. So x equals 7 divided by the sine of 30 degrees. So I just go to my graphing calculator, and we do 7 divided by, now this says the sine of 30 degrees, so we're just going to type in the sine of 30 degrees, because we are given our angle. We're not looking for it, so we don't take the inverse. So when you divide, you get 14. So the value of x is 14. So it only asks us what x is, so now we know that this side is 14. So if we look at the next example, now it's looking at cosine. So once again, we have our formula written down right here. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So when we do this, so we have the cosine of 30 degrees equals adjacent. Adjacent is x, hypotenuse is 5. So the cosine of 30 degrees equals x over 5. Now we multiply by the denominator, and notice this time the denominator is 5, so we multiply both sides by 5. And when I rewrite it, I have 5 times the cosine of 30 degrees is equal to x. So I multiply both sides by 5, and I get 5 times the cosine of 30 degrees equals x. So since it equals x, I can plug everything in the calculator. So I do 5 cosine of 30 degrees. Since I have the degrees, I just type in 30. And hit enter, and I get 4.33. So I can just say 4.3 is equal to x, or it's about the value of that. Okay, so that's how we figure out what x equals. And then we can look at the third example, which is tangent. Well, once again, we look at what we're given, and when we look at what we're given the tangent of theta equals opposite over adjacent. So we just fill everything in. So the tangent is 15 degrees. Opposite is 2. Adjacent is x. So now we have our equation. The tangent of 15 equals 2 over x. We multiply by the denominator. So we multiply both sides by x. So now I have x tangent of 15 degrees equals 2. So once I get that, we divide by the tangent of 15. Divide by the tangent of 15. So x equals 2 divided by the tangent of 15. And then we go to our trusty calculator and we type in 2 divided by the tangent of 15, which gives us 7.46. So x is about 7.46. So we can continue with these examples. So we look at the next one. All right. It says since we have the hypotenuse and we have the adjacent, we'll use cosine. So we have the adjacent, a to the adjacent, x is the hypotenuse. So since we have adjacent and hypotenuse, that's cosine. So now we just plug everything in. So the cosine of 45 degrees equals the adjacent, which is 8, over x. To solve this, we need to get rid of the denominator, which is x. So we multiply both sides by x. So x cosine of 45 degrees is equal to 8. Now we divide by the cosine of 45 degrees. So you divide by the cosine of 45 degrees. So x equals, so we have 8 divided by cosine 45, close my parentheses, so make sure that cosine's inside the parentheses, and we get 11.3. So x is about 11.3. So when we look at the next one, find r. Well, here's r, here's our angle, so this is our hypotenuse, this is adjacent, and this is opposite. So we are given opposite and adjacent. So which of these ratios uses opposite and adjacent? Sine. So we know we're going to use a sine is opposite over adjacent. So the sine of 60 degrees equals the opposite, which is r, over 25. To solve this, we multiply by the denominator, so I multiply by 25. They cross off, times 25. So now I have 25 times the sine of 60 equals to r. So we plug it in. 25 sine of 60. And we get 21.6. Oh, sorry. It's not sine. It's not sine. I did that wrong. It's tangent. What was I thinking? Opposite over adjacent. We're given the opposite and adjacent. So it's actually tangent. Tangent. Whoops. So tangent. Yeah, since it's opposite and adjacent, we have the tangent. So we do 25 tangent of 60, which gives us 43.3. So 43.3 is equal to the value of r. So if we just move on. So when we look at these, so we have, here's our angle. We have opposite, hypotenuse, so that's sine. Sine is opposite and hypotenuse. So the sine of 30 equals opposite, which is 3, over x, multiply by x, divide by the sine of 30, and then we plug it in. So we do 3 divided by the sine of 30, and we get 6. So what I want you to do is to work on these, pause it, work on it, and then when you're done, come back in it and check your answers. So I'm going to move a little bit faster now. So when we look at this one, here's our angle, opposite, hypotenuse. So the sine, so we want the sine of 45 equals the opposite, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 4. So we want 4 sine of 45 equals x. So 4 sine of 45, which is about 2.8. So x 2.8. Next one. Next one we get opposite, hypotenuse. So it's our sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of 60 equals 12 over x. So you get x times the sine of 60 equals 12. X equals 12 divided by the sine of 60. So 12 divided by the sine of 60 gives us about 13.9. So it's about 13.9. So we look down here for letter D. We have here opposite, hypotenuse. So we have sine. So the sine of 15 is opposite, which is x, over 25. So 25 times the sine of 15 equals x. So 25 sine of 15 gives us 6.47, so 6.5. And we can move down here for these ones. Notice now this, adjacent and hypotenuse, so this is cosine. So the cosine of 30 equals 2 over x. So what we're going to get is x equals 2 divided by the cosine of 30. And 2 divided by the cosine of 30 gives us about 2.3. Alright, and if we look at the next one, here's our angle, adjacent, hypotenuse, so the cosine of 45 degrees equals x over 27, so multiply both sides by the denominator. So the cosine, 27 times the cosine of 45, so 27 times the cosine of 45 gives us about 19.09, which is 19.1. So 19.1 is equal to x. And we look at the last one here, C. You have adjacent and hypotenuse, so the cosine of 15 degrees equals adjacent is 100. Hypotenuse is x. So x times the cosine of 15 equals 100. X equals 100 divided by the cosine of 15. So 100 divided by the cosine of 15 gives us 103.5. So x is 103.5. And if we just look at the next set, okay, so we have the tangent ones. So here's our angle, opposite, adjacent. So the tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of 45, well, what you should know about this one is that since it's tangent of 45, they're going to be the same. So either way, we can solve it. X over 3.3. So 3.3 times the tangent of 45 is equal to x, because we multiply by the denominator. So 3.3 times the tangent of 45 gives us 3.3. So x is equal to 3.3. And this one over here, so this is our angle, that's opposite. This is adjacent, so the tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of 75, opposite is 17, adjacent is x. So you get x multiplied by x, divide by tangent of 75. So x equals 17 divided by the tangent of 75. So 17 divided by the tangent of 75 gives us approximately 4.55, which is 4.6. And I'll show you how to set all these up. So if we look at this one here, so when we look at this, alright, so here we go. So we are given opposite, hypotenuse. So the first one is sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of 30 degrees equals x over 8. So 8 times the sine of 30. And 8 times the sine of 30 is going to give us 4. So that'll be 4. When we look at B, we're given our angle. That's opposite. This is adjacent. So that's tangent. Opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of 60 degrees equals 20 over x. So multiply both sides by x. So you get x times the tangent of 60 equals 20. So x equals 20 divided by the tangent of 60. And that will give us 11.5 if we do it out in the calculator. When you look at C, so here's C, here's our angle, this is adjacent, this is hypotenuse, so adjacent and hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so now we have the cosine of 75 degrees equals 0.5 over x, multiplied by the denominator, and divide by the cosine, and that will give you 1.9. And we have 4 more problems here, 5 more problems. Alright, so for this one, I'm going to show you how to set them up and then I'll just give you the answers. So here we're given adjacent, hypotenuse, so we have the cosine. So it's the cosine of 45 equals adjacent, which is x, hypotenuse is 125. So we set that up, and our value of x is going to be 88.4. When you look at E, here's your angle. You're given this, which is opposite. You're given this, which is adjacent. So sine is opposite over adjacent. So the sine of 15 degrees equals opposite, which is 11 over x. X equals 42.5-ish. For F, here's our angle. We are given this is the hypotenuse, this is adjacent, so the cosine. So we have cosine of 30 degrees, adjacent is 9, hypotenuse is x, so cosine of 30 equals 9 over x, x equals 10.4. You look at G, here's our angle, this is the opposite, this is the hypotenuse, so opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So the sine of 40 degrees equals opposite, which is x, hypotenuse is 2. Solve this, multiply both sides by 2, so x is about 1.3. And the last one, so we have, here's our angle, this is the opposite, this is adjacent, so opposite and adjacent is tangent, so the tangent of 20 degrees equals the opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 8. Multiply both sides by 8, and you're going to be x is about 2.9. Alright, and that is just working with some of these practices.